slide before we try to get started. My name is Rebecca Kunkel. I work at Rutgers-Newark Law School. I'm a librarian there. And this presentation today, I don't know how many people are here because you want to know what the heck non-CFR regulations are, and how many people are here because you want to know about linked data. But plan is to kind of start with explaining what I mean by non-CFR regulations and how we're building a collection of these things at Rutgers, and then get a little bit more into the details of how we're doing subject indexing, largely through using linked data technology. So, first slide, I picked a few examples. I don't know how well you can see here, but the focus of our collection is on military regulations from the military departments, so the Department of the Army, Department of the Navy, Department of the Air Force, and then stuff from the Coast Guard and Marine Corps, which are kind of their own departments and kind of not. But they all publish regulations that do not have to be published in the CFR. Actually, these are not the only agencies that publish regulations that don't need to be published in the CFR. If you are down with the Federal Register Act, you know that the stuff that needs to go in the Federal Register and therefore into the CFR is only those regulations with general applicability and legal effect. This stuff has applicability within the department itself. It's for internal use. That doesn't mean it's not interesting for people outside of the department. And I think, like, I kind of picked these because I personally think they're self-evidently pretty interesting topics. The first one is a Marine Corps order having to do with conscientious objectors. The second one is actually a joint regulation governing the use of animals in military experiments. And the third is an extension of the manual for courts martial that's published by the Air Force. And all this stuff is stuff that we've collected off of the publication websites of these different departments. So aside from the fact that I think stuff like this is kind of self-evidently interesting, there's a couple reasons why I think libraries should be concerned with this. The first one is we're a depository library, and this set of documents falls under this much larger category of fugitive documents, documents that aren't going through GPO for publication. And this has been a problem for GPO for a long time. I have like just two quotes because it's kind of hard to estimate how many of these documents there are. But you know, the first estimate was taken from an article in 2003, and this was saying, you know, as of 2003, about half of the print publications were not going through GPO, and then there were about probably 250,000 online fugitive documents. A more recent article by James A. Jacobs, I think he maybe defines documents a little bit more broadly, and that's part of the reason why he gets this huge number. But his sense is that one might reasonably estimate that there are more born digital government information items produced in a single year than all of the publications that have been published over the history of the depository library program. So this is a big problem that is getting bigger, and as a depository library, we're concerned with working on solutions to that problem. The other, I think, big reason for caring about this, I think, is related to the issue of link rot in legal citations. And again, I don't know how well you can see these pages. The one on the right is a page from the CFR. The one on the left is a page from the Military Justice Reporter. So this is an example. If you have really good eyesight and can see that, I don't know if I'd be able to see it if I was sitting in the audience, but this one page of the CFR has, it is referring you to Army regulations, and that's part of what they're defining in this regulation. And the other page is a page from a case in the Military Justice Reporter, Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces case. And again, they're discussing Air Force regulations that are published by the Department of the Air Force on their website, rather than going through any third party to publish. So obviously the danger with that is if the website is the main place that these things are being published, even though it's not exactly the same issue as link rocks. They're not citing to a particular URL, but if the only place that these things appear is online, obviously there's a good danger of agency taking it down, altering content without any warning, and it can be irretrievably lost very easily. And I just, I had this slide as well, like looking at how big of a problem this is again. I think that there was a recent article in the Yale Journal of Law and Technology just looking at Supreme Court opinions from '96 to 2010. They found that about 29% of links in Supreme Court opinions were no longer working. And this is from the Chesapeake Digital Preservation Group. They've been looking over time at items in their collection. They started with a sample from 2008, and as you can kind of see with the graph, with each progressive year, there are more and more broken links, as you would expect. So up to the point that in 2014, when this report was published, they're now up to around 50% of the links in their sample set no longer work. So again, the link rot issue is something that has gotten some attention recently, rightfully so, because it's an issue that continues to expand, and I think it's the fact that there are legal materials that are only being published on websites maintained by individual departments creates a problem, because it's the only place these things are available. So that's kind of the background of what the stuff is that we're collecting and why we're doing it. So at this point, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about how we're collecting things and how we're doing subject indexing. At this point, I think we've got about 5,000 documents along with the metadata for them. And that was done primarily with using custom screen scrapers that we wrote. So just to give you an idea how that would work, there's 5 websites that we crawl and collect data from. This is just like one of the examples. This is where the Navy publishes its department regulations. So each screen scraper is directed to an initial URL, goes to that URL, downloads the HTML source code from the URL, and then it parses through and tries to extract everything that might be useful here. So with this one, you get a citation, and I'm going to talk more about the citations when I get to the part about subject indexing, but the citation, there's a title available, and also the date that it was initially published. And that actually gets you a lot of useful information that, you know, again, no one had to sit down and create all those data entries. Like, we're just taking it directly off of the website that's already available. In the meantime, after it's kind of parsed through that table and taken the relevant stuff out, that gets formatted into RDF, and then that is entered into a triple store. We're using the Sesame triple store to hold metadata from this. And at the same time, it's saving the metadata. It's also following those links to the individual documents, which they all happen to come in PDF format. So it follows those individual links and downloads the actual document from the link to save to our server. So to get to the subject indexing part, that is being done at the same time that the rest of the metadata, including the issuance date and the title and the citation, are being created. I kind of need to back up and explain, like, a little bit more about how these regulations are numbered, because it's actually very useful, and it's not something that the departments are actually taking advantage of that well to help people find things. So each one of these regulations follows a format. This example is Marine Corps Order. This is the conscientious objector's instruction. This is Marine Corps Order 1306.16F. And each department, their format's a little bit different, but they follow the same general principle, which is that there's something in there that is standing in for a subject code. So in this example, 1306 is the subject code. And we know that because at this link down here, there is I'm just going to show you an example. This link is to the Navy Subject Identification Code Manual. So each department publishes something like this in either a regulation or a manual, explaining what all of the different subject codes mean. And it also gives some instructions about how to use it, so you can also get the pattern out of this manual as well. You see this one is fairly complicated. They're not all this complicated. The Air Force and the Army have kind of less detailed, non-hierarchical classification systems. The Navy shares this with the Marine Corps, which is a sub-department, and also the Coast Guard incorporates a lot of this too. So there's actually 3 that we're working with. So to add the subject indexing, basically we take that stuff out of the manual that's locked up somewhere in a PDF, and bring it together with the label that is on each and every one of these documents. And the way that we did that is with RDF. So we've actually published, there's 3 or 4, so there may be 5. There's the ontologies that we're using for this project are online now. And I'm just showing you a little example of the code just so you have like an idea of how it looks. We rely a lot on the SKOS vocabulary, which is RDF-based vocabulary. It's designed to describe things like this. Subject classification systems is one of the things. It can also be used to describe the sources. folksonomies, other ways of organizing information. So it's very useful for kind of translating something that is not in a very machine accessible format into something that can be very useful in an application. So this example, if you speak OWL and RDF, this might make perfect sense, but if not, the basic idea here is like there's a bunch of tags. Some of them connect the individual subject, which per RDF practice is represented by a URI, and then there's a series of tags that connect it to human readable labels, including the numeric code, and there's also a series of tags that, in this case, connect it to other related subjects in the same vocabulary. There's also a few tags that are connecting it to other subjects that are generally equivalent in the other vocabularies, because you know their concerns are the same. They might have different ways of describing it, but there's a lot of equivalencies between these different vocabularies. So I'm going to show you the interface that we built with this. Let me see if I can just get on here. Show you. So, like, the first thing is, you know, now that it's an RDF, you can send a query to the triplestore to get a list of all the subject headings, which gives you a way to display to the user what the possibilities are. And you can just, this is an example, like the creative one for each of the different departments. This is the one for the Air Force. I'm just going to go in here. These descriptions that pop up are taken from the Air Force manual for describing their subject. Oh, that's not good. Their subject codes. So when you mouse over, you get a little bit more information. That again is going through by submitting a query to the triplestore holding the ontology. I'm just going to click on this, and then when you click on it, it gives you a whole bunch of possibilities for all the things that have been categorized under that subject. And it also gives, at the end, some parallel suggestions for similar subjects used by other departments. So you can kind of keep going through and clicking. I'll show you the Navy one because it's a little bit more involved. It's also a little bit slower to load for that reason. But this gives like the whole hierarchical subject vocabulary that is included in that manual I showed you. And each one of these, if you start following the links, will give you suggestions again for related subjects and for all of the items that we have that we've collected that come under that subject code. So I guess I talked really fast because I'm only 20 minutes in. Maybe I'll see if anyone has any questions, anything at this point that you want more information about. Yes?
Sure. So the data model, I gather, is entirely a sort of SKOS vocabulary at this point. I mean, that's what I seem to be seeing.
Yeah.
And have you thought about how you might, maybe you've already done it, thought about how you might extend it to look at stuff across all 3 service branches, for example? Have you thought about a sort of unifying layer for crosswalking among them?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is what the related subjects are supposed to be doing.
Okay. Okay.
And that was, like, I think it's pretty accurate, like the information that is in the main ontologies that, you know, we have good information that's drawn directly out of the manuals.
Right.
For like the crosswalks, as you say, like that was kind of my judgment.
So you're not trying to tie them all up to some conceptual scheme in the sky. You're going, okay.
No. Like it might be nice to link them to other existing subject classifications. Like, I mean, I know the Department of Defense would be like the next logical thing to do. Like, they have a similar system for numbering internal regulations, and you know, a lot of their topics probably will see some overlap. Certainly, a lot of the defense instructions are cited in these same regulations. So, but no, I'm not trying to like be I want to say super user, but I'm not trying to be like the puppeteer, like saying like what the right way to categorize things are. I'm trying to like just use what's already there. The subject indexing has already been done.
Right.
I'm just trying to unlock it. Yes.
So you showed a page that had material and then similar items, but that similar items that's a SKOS relationship
Yes.
that you defined in.
Yes.
And that links the code number in one service to the related code number in the other service.
Yes.
So you went through and did that for all those codes.
Yes. Which isn't really as bad as it sounds.
It sounds bad. Well, it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, maybe someone here has a genius idea for automating that, but yes.
Is there a kind of homepage to access all of this stuff?
Yeah, no, not really. But if you want to just have a place to start, like you can go to govdocs.rutgers.edu/mail/navy.php, and that'll get you started. And if anyone wants to play with it and give us your suggestions, I would love to hear them. So. Yes.
Yeah, just share your thoughts with us, please, about adaptability and scalability. So, how does this workflow as well as the technology lend itself to other government documents? How can we apply this to other branches and scale it? We need somebody. If you could just kind of walk me through that again. So, what are you doing as an analyst first to suss out the subject headings? How much overhead is there in the selection and domain process? What does the screen scraping entail? So since we have the time, if you can just kind of walk us through what your experience has been to date and how easy is it to repeat some of those things? Or
yeah. So I mean, like I said, like I haven't looked into a lot of different agencies, but you know, the Department of Defense, for example, is one of the ones that I looked at, and you know, from what I recall, they have a similar publication describing their subject classifications. They have a similar basic pattern that the subject, the numeric code for the subject appears in the title of the regulation. So that would be I want to say easy because honestly I did a lot of this stuff cranking through it by hand, but it would certainly be doable within a reasonable time frame. Like in terms of making it interoperable with this, like that is one of the good things about using RDF. What am I trying to say? Like we have this stuff published online, so like anyone can go and look at the ontology and start messing around with it in Protege. So like what I did, I made each individual one because I had pretty, I felt like it was pretty uncontroversial to just like translate what was in the manual into format using these tags. Like there's a little bit that you could argue about, but I think it's possible to do that with a fair degree of accuracy, and that like most people would agree that yeah, you represented that appropriately. So I did those each as separate files first, and then I started drawing the connections together, and that's made pretty easy with Protege, which is an ontology modeling software. It's free software. It's available through protege.stanford.edu, which basically lets you either like upload a text file of RDF or put in a link if it's something that's already published online, so you can see everything that's in there without having to just like understand what the RDF is. Like that's how that file I showed you was generated. So, like with that in mind, it's a pretty easy next step to start going through and looking at, well, what subjects in this other classification are similar. My kind of method for doing that was start with the smallest vocabulary first and kind of work through that. I like did a little bit of just searching in the PDF file for term or similar terms that I could find, and kind of compare like the two smallest things, which were less complicated, and then expand it out to the more complicated thing, which was like that huge Navy classification system. So that's, I don't know if that addresses your question, but that's kind of how I would see it playing out, like in terms of extending it to different agencies.
Yep.
So I have a question about extension in a slightly different direction. It's easy to imagine that there are interpretive documents out there that deal with this stuff, right? Because people misapply things and we end up interpreting whatever. Do you think that there would be, how would you need to build out your model in order to accommodate those?
I'm not sure
Well, you have a subject matter classification scheme, and presumably you've got some documents out there that aren't really themselves regulations. They're something else altogether, but they're closely bound to those regulations in the sense that they interpret them. So presumably you can use this classification scheme to some degree as a classification scheme for those documents, or at least one that needs to be tied to it somehow. I guess maybe I've embedded about 14 questions in there, of which the first is probably, would you do a separate model for the documents and then come up with some sort of relationship that would tie them back to the reg subject code, or how would you go about that?
I'm not sure I have an answer for that.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, it was definitely a pop quiz. So.
Yeah, those are the two big questions.
Right.
How we start and
It seems to me the relationship between the regs and the subregs might be awfully complex.
Yes.
Does that seem like, you know, there's probably not a one-to-one relationship, at least there may be for some individual documents, but I imagine quite often there's going to be something other than a one-to-one relationship between the documents you have in your collection and a specific section of the CFR.
Right. Right.
And that might be hard to map from subject codes to CFR sections.
Yeah, I mean, particularly if you
If
imagine.
it could be done, it would be fantastic. But
Well,
it might not be
I'm not thinking in terms of CFR sections as much as I am of some, something that I'll, for lack of something better, we could call an incident report in which multiples of these regulations have been violated or contravened in some way. Right. And because these things don't typically happen one at a time. So yes, there I think the relationship is very complex. How do you map back to this, or do you even want to?
On the relationship part, could you talk to us more about the link rod problem and how that's being addressed in your workflow here? Because you are noting when there is an explicit linkage in these documents. So I wasn't following in your workflow how the link rod problem might be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, the link rot problem to me is more of a preservation problem. I think the main problem is right now there's only one copy. Now there's 2 copies. So we're getting there. I don't know. I'm hoping that this is like a permanent home that would be like a comfortable place to you know, be able to find these documents over the long haul, but we're still at a very early point in that process.
Okay, could you talk a little bit about some of the software you're using on the back end of this?
Sure. Like what? You want me to talk about Sesame?
Open up Sesame.
Open Sesame.
Don't do it.
That was a trick question, Rebecca.
Was
I
it?
wouldn't go there.
Are you like a Sesame fan or hater?
I've been having a lot of fun with it. I was actually going to ask you, so which version of Sesame are you using? Are you using 5.5 or are you using the standard edition?
Oh
or
my gosh, I
Lite, or-
don't remember. Whatever the most recent thing is.
Are you using GraphDB then? Okay. How many triples are you dealing with right now? How big is the repository?
Once it's, I don't understand what they're talking about.
I should have
It's time for me to leave it.
taken down this information, but I think 100,000 is
Okay.
like it's not huge.
Right, it's pretty manageable at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know, I haven't had any problems with it
Right.
exploding or anything. Like, it's pretty. So, Sesame is a triple store. It is designed to hold RDF. The main reason for using it is because it plays very nicely with the ontology. So it was pretty straightforward process, just like uploading a text file that I had created using Protege to the triple store, and then you can run all sorts of queries on that information. It's kind of like the coding part of it. I had used like PHP with MySQL and Perl with MySQL before starting with Sesame. It's pretty analogous to that. Like the functions for interacting with Sesame aren't really as robust or well established, but it's definitely manageable. I don't know, it's kind of vague. I don't know if that makes a ton of sense to people, but yeah. So like the web scrapers are written in Perl. So to upload the RDF to Sesame from Perl, I'm just using the REST client module. And I don't really, there's probably people here that understand the architecture of that way better than I do. But the basic idea is like you're submitting the query via a URL. For the PHP part of it, there's like a little library that's available on GitHub that I use to make it very easy, because that is designed to work specifically with Sesame, and it's called PHP Sesame.php.
I'm curious about the little pain points that add up to screaming pains in the neck. How is the data, right? I mean, it's not unusual to find when somebody goes to SKOSify a manually compiled taxonomy of whatever kind, that there are actually contradictions and bumps and general ugliness concealed in something that people really haven't looked at for machine processing. Did you hit any of that?
I'd say it was actually pretty smooth sailing. Like I had, like my main issue with that was more like not being a real pro with the Protege software and getting kind of confused with, like it gives you all these different options for exporting things, and
I'd like a show of hands from anyone who's not confused by Protege.
So, but I don't know, so yeah, like there weren't like contradictions in it that were creating logical inconsistencies that would then like break the ontology when you tried to run the reasoner. So that was pretty fine.
And when I said little pain points, what did you think I was going to ask about?
Oh, I thought you were just talking about more general, like there've been other headaches. Like don't get like to know about the other headaches.
Love to.
Well, the parsing of the HTML has not always been smooth sailing. I think most of the issues I encountered, I was able to work around, but I discovered that one of these websites is just so crazy that I kind of just gave up really trying to get like I could show you if I can find it, where the Marine Corps publishes their regulations. They have kind of a complicated system, and they seem to like have the documents linked from individual pages that are each coded individually. Like they don't seem to be dynamically generated, so there's all sorts of stuff going on there, like yeah. So luckily, you know, there's always something you can do. They did, for whatever reason, have pretty good embedded metadata in their documents. That was I'm not going to say it was the most reliable or perfect, but it was a lot better than what I was getting off the web page. So if you happen to be working with something like a PDF or an image that has embedded metadata, and the thing I used for getting that out, and also like writing additional metadata, was EXIF tool, which is a command line utility. And basically, like, lets you read anything that's embedded in a document.
So if I were to ask you to put together a checklist for another librarian that was designed as a kind of pre-survey to help them avoid the various open manholes that you've encountered, but what would be on it?
Don't do it.
No, do it. It's really fun, but yeah, I'm trying to think. Like the thing that is like freshest in my mind was that issue that I was just talking about with the poorly formed HTML. So I think like if you're gonna be like writing your own little script to crawl a website, like that's like the main thing to look at. The other thing was like a lot of the stuff is in tables. Tables are really nice, except for when there's extra tables and cells and nonsense within the table that doesn't show up, because then, you know, it breaks things. Think the parsing library we're using didn't understand it. So take a good hard look at the HTML. Would be top of my list. I'm trying to think like more. Like I did the ontology bit of it a little bit earlier, so that's not as fresh in my mind. Oh, here's something. Like a lot of the URIs were generated using spreadsheets. Because I just like couldn't think of another good way to do it. Like I basically copied and pasted stuff into spreadsheets, which again it wasn't really as bad as it sounds. And then I ran the old version of Protege, which deals with spreadsheets. It's out of date at this point, so really make sure that you're using, if you are going the spreadsheet route with Protege, use 3.4.7, because that is the one the syntax works for. Pretty specific advice, but like that was my experience trying to get stuff out of the PDF. So I'm okay if there's no more questions.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
So your interface, and you have ways to drill down through things. Is it possible using Sesame, or is it something that you're thinking of maybe doing if you have time, to put in some kind of other interface with like drop-down selections, or can it be made a little more?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Is it how doable? The real question though is how doable does that seem to be using something like Sesame and SPARQL?
That seems very doable. The main reason why I haven't messed with it yet is just kind of like my laziness with like dealing with JavaScript and or CSS to do that. So
You're not alone in that.
Well, I mean, you just got this done recently, so this is.
But yeah, I mean like the way a lot of this information is being generated is just like looping through query results from Sesame, so there's no reason why you can use those results and generate something fancier than what you see here. Right. Yes.
Is there do you have in your head sort of, this is my scope noted, this is like this project is designed to do this, and I want to cover regulations on this with this agency from this year forward to this date forward and their changes so that you know what the resource that you're creating is and exactly where it starts on each chunk of it?
Yeah, I haven't done that yet, but that's definitely something to do. I think that, I mean, part of the scope is kind of determined by what's out there and just like when we started doing it, and also like how convenient it was to get stuff out. Like if you mess around with it at all, you'll notice that there's like a million Air Force regulations and also other stuff that isn't quite strictly a regulation, but was just really easily accessible from the same interface that the regulations were on. So there's a little bit of stuff like that. Like it might not be like the most rigorous collection development policy you could think of, but there's definitely like a core of stuff that I'm trying to get, which is like the departmental regulations, the stuff that is labeled in this way. It's typically making reference to other Department of Defense instructions or other, or doing other legal interpretations of CFR sections or sections of the US Code typically, and like elaborating on those other sources of law. So, all right, last call. All right, thanks for coming.